A few years ago, Nick and Susan Howard and their family moved into their new house here at Blythburgh in Suffolk. They were pottering around in one of their garden sheds, looking at one of the innumerable old cupboards, and they discovered that. A bit alarming, certainly. A bit scary, I think so, but not really surprising when you look at the rest of the garden. In amongst these trees are some rather unusual, pretty impressive garden features. Look at this. Isn't it fantastic? Looks a bit like a little church, doesn't it? Well, we know that King Henry I founded a priory somewhere in Blythburgh in the 12th century. And 500 years before that, a Saxon king was killed on these marshes and buried here. Could this overgrown garden have been one of the most sacred sites in East Anglia? Time Team have got just 3 days to find out. Blythburgh is a landmark on the coast road between Norfolk and Suffolk. It's a tiny village surrounded on 3 sides by salt marsh and mud flats, and is dominated by a huge church known as the Cathedral of the Marshes. But we're here to investigate another religious site, one that may once have been as important and impressive as the church that still stands here today. And the remains of our site are tucked away in the garden of our hosts, Nick, a builder, and Susan, who owns a nearby beach cafe. It's a fantastic house. What's it called?
It's called the Priory.
And what's the road called running alongside it?
Priory Road.
Mick, do you think there might be some kind of clue there?
I think it's a bit of a clue, isn't it? There's something going on. We know there was a 12th century Augustinian Priory in Blythburgh, so it's somewhere in this area.
You do realise that in order to find out what's going on here, we're really going to have to wallop your garden hard.
Yes, we understand that, but we'd rather that you didn't know before we start the restoration of the formal gardens.
Formal gardens. There's posh. Mick, those ruins are pretty fantastic, aren't they?
They are, but they're pretty enigmatic.
Enigmatic, I like that. Well, the best way to start solving that enigma is to look at the bits that are still above ground. And for an old chapel head like Mick, the remains are very informative.
They are sort of pitched like that.
Yeah.
In fact, you look here, the stones...
Because he's spotted that this huge lump of brick and flint dates to the time that we know the priory was built.
This is what I call herringbone masonry, because it looks like the bones of a fish. And it's a building style that you see in the Roman period, but you also get it right at the end of the Anglo-Saxon period into the beginning of the Norman period.
So are you saying that this whole building could be either from just before or just after William the Conqueror arrived?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably around about 1100, something like that, but round about that Norman conquest period.
This date is our first clue, as a 12th century Norman priory should follow a basic plan. There should be a great hall, dormitory for the monks to sleep in, and a refectory or dining area forming 3 sides of a cloister. And on the 4th side, there should be a church. And Mick's now confident that's what we have in this garden.
Well, this is probably the south wall of the nave, so if we come through here, we'd be looking down the nave to the west doorway at the west entrance. And then that way, we'd be looking up towards the eastern end, where the altar would be, and the sort of great east window.
So is this going to be one of these digs where you already know what the shape of the thing is and we just find it?
Well, they are quite predictable plans. I mean, if that is the alignment of the church, then the cloister, with the buildings around it, is either going to be on that side, on the south side, or just as likely on the north side, going out that way. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment, is put some test excavations in to see which way the cloister goes.
Because once we know where the cloister is, then we'll be able to predict where all the other buildings are.
That's right. We'll know where the chapter house is, the refectory, the dormitory. It all sort of should slot into place. Except it's never quite as simple as that when we get to it, is it?
Never. Not once, ever. So we're putting in a couple of trenches against this wall to test if the cloister is on the southern side of the church. And we're getting lots of broken brick and roof tile. But unfortunately, nothing that immediately screams cloister. But on the other side of the wall, Phil has found foundations that confirm Mick was right about these ruins. This was a church.
Oh, that is cracking stuff. It's the floor of the church. See, it's got this straight edge here. Well, look, that one's broken, but this is a lovely straight edge running across there. So that's just literally, presumably, a panel that goes around the outside. The main floor, they have that up. And you can see here, look, we've actually got the wall of the building here. Look how protected that is. Look, lovely, smooth surface there.
What's the colour about, Phil, and the black and the yellow kind of? Is that
Some sort of glazing or...?
Yeah, it is. They're glazed touch. So, I mean, if we get a few more of them, I mean, it may well be that we can get them into some sort of maybe checkerboard pattern, so they would have been black and white, yeah. Oh, wow.
You're going to dig that way?
Just try and stop us.
All right.
Hey, what you could do, you own the place.
Oh, they'll get used to him eventually. A quality glazed surface like this would be typical of the floor you'd find in an early monastic church from around the time of William the Conqueror. But establishing this is a Norman church is only the beginning. We now need to find out how big it is, what shape it is, and so on, as well as finding where the cloister and all the other buildings are. And we also need to see how the priory we're investigating fits into the wider history of Blythburgh, because Stuart believes this place has been a hive of activity for millennia, mainly due to it being one of the oldest crossing points across the river. But what's puzzling him is how Blythburgh grew from fairly humble origins into a place that became influential enough in the Middle Ages to have both the priory church we're digging today, as well as the huge parish church that still dominates the landscape. It now looks like our church was also once pretty impressive.
Is it really a column, or is it a wall with a lot of it weathered away?
When we arrived, I just assumed the priory church would be no more than a small chapel, but Bob, our buildings expert, believes there's far more to it. This column is now so eroded it looks like something out of Death Valley. But it's actually the remains of a sophisticated piece of architecture.
It really is a column, because if you look high up, you can see there's a change in angle, and there's a slight indent, and it comes in at a higher level. It suggests that we're on a triforium, so that there's probably another layer of arches running off in the other direction, perhaps only for one bay, but nonetheless, it's part of a pier.
If this church was built in the shape of a cross with a tower where the two lines meet, could this be one of the pillars that supported the tower?
Yeah, circumstantial evidence is that the ones that support the tower, because they're carrying a much greater weight, are bigger. They're the ones that last longer.
So our church is beginning to take on rather grand proportions, what with a crossing and pillars supporting a tall central tower. But until Nick and Susan bought this house, hardly anyone even knew about the priory ruins, as the previous owner wouldn't let anyone in, including, it turns out, one of Britain's leading monastic experts, our very own Professor Mick.
I came here years ago when I was working on monasteries because of the Augustinian Priory that was here, and actually I got it completely wrong for Blythburgh.
In what way?
Well, I didn't know about the ruins in the wood down there, and I think I rather assumed that the priory church was the parish church, and it had then been taken over and turned into a parish church later on.
What's the history of this place?
Well, we know that in the 7th century, the local Saxon king in the area, a chap with the unlikely name of Anna, I don't suppose that's how you pronounce it at all, he was killed in battle with his son, and they brought them here to bury them, and that then became a pilgrimage site by the 12th century. So there should be a Saxon site here.
Because Sutton Hoo's just up the road.
Well, that's right, and Anna's related to Redwald, who was buried in the ship down at Sutton Hoo. So there is a connection there.
But does that mean that we could have a Saxon boat burial here just as there is at Sutton Hoo?
I wouldn't have thought that was very likely. I'd have thought that Anna was probably buried in a burial mound, a barrow, or more likely actually in a church. And of course the real question is, was that site under the parish church, or was he buried in a predecessor to the priory, in which case we've got quite a good chance of finding it. And that would be a fantastic thing to get, something like that.
Christianity is becoming part of the establishment.
And for Sam Newton, our Anglo-Saxon expert, the whole King Arna story is massive, offering all sorts of intriguing possibilities for the site we're digging.
What we have is this priceless reference in the 12th century Book of Ely, and it specifically refers to the death and burial at a place called Blythburgh. So we're talking about clearly a very important royal shrine, recognised and almost certainly invested in by Ely for its upkeep and maintenance. And indeed, the founding of the Priory may relate to that shrine.
But that's extremely interesting, isn't it? If Anna's bones are still here in the 12th century, they could potentially be here to this day.
That's right. We know he's here somewhere in Blythburgh. And what's going on here in the 12th century? Why does King Henry make this great gesture and encourage this great priory to be founded? Or is it a refoundation of the early royal minster? That's the fascinating possibility. So this could really be one of the great discoveries of all time.
Sam believes there's a chance that when King Henry I founded the priory in Blythburgh, he built it on the site of the earlier Saxon church and its shrine to King Anna or Arna. But unfortunately, we've got to sort out the Norman priory layout first before we can deal with whatever else might be here. And frustratingly, John's now wandered off into next door's garden, determined to find out how far the priory church stretches away to the west. And we've also opened a trench to the north of the church, just in case the cloister we've so far failed to find is actually up here. But all we've got so far is a big hollow full of stuff that doesn't make sense.
It looks like a toe bone, but whether it's an...
But although it seems to be not much more than a rubbish dump, there are little nuggets of information in amongst the mishmash of broken window glass and pottery.
Very much mistaken, that's a bit of medieval. Yep, that's a little bit of medieval courseware. It's kind of a bog standard sort of East Suffolk courseware, I suppose, sort of 13th, 14th century, maybe 12th, or something like that. Still nice. That's our first bit of medieval pottery.
Oh, splendid. I mean, it's just out of the topsoil there, but we've got lots of reused Roman pan tile with mortar on it.
Excellent.
So we've now got more evidence of how the church was built using recycled materials. But we may also be getting to grips with how big a building it was.
So look, that's the south wall of the chapel in front of us.
Right.
That's it marked in
Because
blue.
John thinks he's found how far west the church extended.
Now look, the wall continues through.
Yeah.
And it basically comes through here.
Yeah.
Comes back and then turns a right angle at this point. I think we've probably got the west end of the chapel at this point.
The whole west end of the building? So could there be a doorway or something?
Well, there may be.
I mean... Does anything show on that?
There's nothing on that. I mean, that's as far as we get. I couldn't actually see an entrance because we only managed to get up to this edge because of the vegetation. But I think if you put an L-shaped trench coming down here, getting that south wall and turning this way and getting the west end here, and you'll see if there's an entrance.
Right.
Stuart, Nick and Susan are searching for the ancient river crossing that Stuart thinks would have attracted people to Blythburgh for thousands of years, a place that would have been imbued with mystery and magic.
Interestingly, at low water, you can actually cross the river where the bridge is. So would that have been a historical route?
It's quite probable. The key thing is where you cross the marsh and where you arrive at becomes a very special place in a prehistoric landscape. And I think that's where traditions build up of burials being there from prehistory. It's why you might have got King Arna brought to this place to be buried, why you've got a priory on the same spot. That continuity of importance right back to prehistory, just on that little lump that is Blythburgh.
Stuart's sure Blythburgh would have been a sacred or religious refuge for centuries before King Anna died. His burial would almost certainly have attracted pilgrims for hundreds of years after. But would it have been to our site?
I feel really perplexed about this, John.
Well, it would help if we could work out exactly what we have here. We're certain we have a priory church. The problem is the geophys doesn't really have much evidence for the rest of the priory.
I mean, clearly they're showing something. They're either showing, well, you say walls, there might be robber pits, whatever.
Well, look, they're definitely walls. The resistance there, that's the wall in Faye's Trench.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. So if that's a wall, there's no reason why these shouldn't be walls.
That would leave us with such a small cloister, if that's what's being indicated there, that I just wonder whether either the cloister is on the other side of the church, on the north side of the church over here, or that we're looking for a much more unconventional and irregular plan than we were expecting.
Well, Mick did warn me it wasn't going to be easy. But really, our geophys isn't working for us. And I'm not sure our trenches have told us that much either. Surely it doesn't have to be quite so confusing.
Mick, it is a church, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's the church, and I think we're probably under the crossing here. This is probably the southwest pillar. That's the northwest pillar. So that might be either the west wall or the east
yes,
wall.
All right. Thank you very much, Mick. Calm down. I hope you understood more of that than I did. What I do know is that if this is a church and that's the west end, then that must be the east end, the important end, and that's where anything like a shrine would be?
Yeah, if Anna was buried in here and if there's a shrine or a tomb, it's going to be at that end of the church somewhere.
Anna, our mysterious Anglo-Saxon king. If we're going to find any evidence of him, then that's where it'll be.
That's right.
But that's for tomorrow. Beginning of day 2 here at Blythburgh in Suffolk, where we're surrounded by this incredibly evocative architecture, which even cynical Mick admits is pretty enigmatic. The question, of course, is what is it? How old is it? Which way does it face? Yesterday evening, Mick, you said you were pretty sure it's a church.
Yeah, I think it's the monastic church, yeah.
And that this is the east end?
Somewhere over this way is the east end.
Exactly. Every time I ask you, you wave your hand vaguely in that direction.
Well, we don't actually know where the east end is because we don't have the end wall. So it may be robbed away. There may be a lot of it gone here.
So what's your trench strategy going to be?
Well, it needs to go from the known area of the church, which is sort of here, right out that way until we hit either a wall or the robber trench, or that we see it is actually dug away and we're never going to find it.
So it's going to be a pretty long trench?
It's going to be a long one going that direction.
And we may find absolutely nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yesterday evening you were winding me up with all these stories about an Anglo-Saxon king and shrines and stuff.
You were winding yourself up about that.
It was you! I just responded to what you said.
That's
you
right.
are such a tease, you.
Nothing like an easy sight, is there?
John's got it in one. And behind that calm exterior, I think Mick's really panicking. Why? Well, because none of us can understand this place, and it should be so simple.
If we get rid of that tree there...
We've already got all these trenches open looking for church walls, other buildings and the priory cloisters, but Mick wants more, including one trench in the middle of a hedge.
Hang on, you're in the fence. All the ivy's caught up in the fence.
But there is method in this madness, as Phil's new trench should locate the east end of the church to go with Matt's west end.
This is the north wall here running east-west, so we're right up.
But so far, all he's hit are some human remains.
We've only got a little bit of the body in, haven't we? We've got like, an arm, a pelvis and stuff. I'm not sure whether it's worth extending this trench too much. We're still looking for the west entrance over there, which is going to be a pretty big job.
Funnily enough, this is good news, as monks were buried outside consecrated walls, suggesting this is part of the church. But we're still waiting for Matt to find the west end, as we don't know how long this part of the church was. But it's the whereabouts of the cloisters, the square of buildings that house the dormitory, refectory and great hall, that's really got us stumped. Some of us thought it should be on the south side of the church, and so we opened a couple of trenches, which haven't produced anything of note yet.
If you look at the line of that one as it comes up here...
Yeah.
But others, notably Stuart, think the cloisters must be on the northern side of the church.
That is very interesting.
That big piece of wall.
It looks like the back edge of a building or a range. Well, if there's a building range going out on the north side, what's it doing?
It's too far from the church, really, to be part of the church, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? And if there's a dormitory on this side, something is going on
then
down
that would
in this
make the
area.
cloister in that hollow down there.
Yeah.
It's a good theory. It's just a pity none of our trenches on this side have found anything either. So, realistically, after a day and a half of digging, we've got a priory church, but no priory. The only thing we've succeeded in is transforming this once elegant garden into something much less picturesque. It's a building site now, let's be honest. We've got, what, 2 trenches there?
Well, no, 3. There's one down the bottom there as well.
Yeah, all right, 3. We've got one just round the corner there.
And one over the fence in the next garden.
All right, come through here a minute. Come on, we've got one there.
Yeah, that's finished, that one.
One round the corner there.
And that's finished.
Little one there.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Oh, doesn't it? Right, we've got one here.
That's finished,
over there. It's more like a pick and mix counter than what I think of as an archaeological dig. How can you learn anything when the trenches are so random?
Well, they're random in relation to what we think the plan of the priory is.
Yeah.
So that those on that side over there are working on the basis that the cloister might be on the north side, and therefore we should be crossing the church wall, the cloister alley, into the cloister, and the range beyond that.
Yeah.
These on this side are working on the basis that the cloister's on this side, and we should hit similar features.
So we haven't finished, we're going to put more in?
Well, we're doing one right at the east end at the moment, and I've got an idea for another one over on the south there.
Yeah, you see, I don't think you're being quite honest. I think you're actually more anxious than you're putting over.
Oh, I am, but I do worry about it all the time, and I keep an eye on it all the time, so I share your worries.
That's fair enough. I can breathe easier now. Carefully you don't fall down one of those little holes.
There we are. Quite confident that's a male. That's all we seem to have had so far is evidence for males.
One thing Mick knows is that there should be loads, even hundreds of burials at the foot of these consecrated walls. Which isn't that surprising, given that Blythburgh Priory was lived in for 400 years before Henry VIII dissolved it.
He found them and we all kind of shrieked and,
And as Susan and her family found out, their remains can turn up in the most unexpected places.
We've got 3 different skulls.
Have you got enough to know whether they might be male or female?
Well, this one here is definitely male because you've got this enormous nuchal crest sticking out here.
Where is
that's the bit right at the back of the skull here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And that's where you get the big muscles of the neck attaching.
Mm-hmm.
And in chaps, they tend to be fairly strong because males tend to have much thicker, heavier muscles anyway. Now, whether that mandible goes with it or not, I don't know, but that, again, is a very masculine-looking mandible. We're quite broad across here, it's quite flared at the back of the mandible, and it's fairly squared at the front, which, again, looks like a masculine one.
Whenever we've talked about a priory over the last couple of days, you've said that it's an Augustinian priory.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's one of the religious groups in the Middle Ages. It's a group that are following the rule of St Augustine.
So they're monks?
No, they're not actually. They're canons, which means that they're priests. They're able to carry out the sacraments, but they're living in a community, in a monastery. Unlike monks, they go out into the community, they mix with the local people. Monks are meant to be enclosed and separated off.
So why were there so many around here?
What tends to happen is that in the 12th and 13th century in particular, aristocratic families want to be sure that they won't spend time in purgatory or hell. So they like having their own group of priests. They've found a monastery. It's somewhere they could be buried in a sort of family mausoleum. And so what's the cheapest way of doing that? What's the cheapest insurance policy? Found a little Augustinian group, get buried in their churches. And of course, East Anglia is the most densely populated part of medieval England.
You never think of that, do you? You always think of Norfolk and Suffolk as being quite sparsely populated.
Yeah, you think of Birmingham and Manchester as the great centres, but in the Middle Ages, it was Norfolk, Suffolk, the whole East Anglian region. So it's where you'd expect most of these early little monasteries to be.
I'll tell you what, Ian, it's really clean, isn't it?
Over in his new super trench, Phil's busy looking for the east end of the church where the altar would have been, and maybe even a royal shrine.
Wait, what the hell's that? Well, there's a damn great hole there, look. Look at it. See, looking at it here, Ian, I think there might be some sort of a feature here or something like that.
Yeah, Phil, can I come and have a look?
Yeah.
Wow. You don't think that's just roots or something?
No, I don't think it is, because look here, it's sandy here, nice and clean sandy and gravelly. And there's actually a bit of a line through here, I don't know if you can see it, but then you get here and it goes like a dirty browny grey stuff with all these bits of chalk in. So I don't think that's natural, and this hole here is within that area that I don't think is natural.
It's intriguing, isn't it? Can I put my hand in, or will
Yeah, well, I reckon. I think.
I don't want to get bit.
There ain't nobody in there, is it?
I don't know yet. Ah!
Yeah. No,
it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't want to go fertling about in there too much, because if there's something in there that is undisturbed...
It's a sobering thought. If Phil's going to find a vault or shrine associated with King Anna, then this is the place.
That's very exciting, isn't it?
Fascinating, isn't it?
There is one wonderful archaeological find. It's just a stray find.
And there is some compelling evidence for a high-status Saxon site here. A whalebone writing tablet was discovered in the Priory garden 100 years ago, and Sam's got hold of a brilliant photographic replica.
What sort of date?
Judging by this rather nice interlace design, 7th, 8th century. And it's what you would expect of, if we've got a royal burial, it's a royal minster. It's a major early Christian centre of authority.
And minster means what?
Minster is an early monastery, and a centre of learning, a focus. An early spiritual power station is the current metaphor we're using. And part of that, of course, would involve a school for teaching literacy.
So it's significant because, in a way, it's a bit like a laptop or something.
It is. One student called it a phyllo wax.
If only we could find something this classy in our trenches, it would be the proof we need that our site was formerly a royal monastery. Unfortunately, we're still stuck trying to find the 12th century cloister.
That's a nice bit of masonry there, Faye.
It is, isn't it? It's beautiful.
And shock horror, it actually looks like we may have found it, and it's sort of where Mick thought it was all along.
Well, looking at the alignment of it, it's sort of right angles to the church building over there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you could argue that it is the cloister on the south side. It would also mean, of course, that this would be the cloister alley here. I think probably you ought to add a couple of metres onto that and see if you've got the other side.
OK.
Sorry to interrupt.
And it would seem the geophys agrees.
Yesterday we were looking at the res.
Yeah.
We said we didn't understand what was going on. It didn't make sense.
No, that's right.
Can we ignore that for the moment?
OK.
And concentrate on Jimmy's radar, because it's giving a different picture.
Right.
Now, this is Faye's Trench. You can see this wall line clearly.
Ah, yes.
The wall goes through to the join there.
Well, that looks much more like a big range on the east side of the cloister, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's a shadow on the inside, and that is the walkway, and that matches up perfectly with the gap.
The gap.
So that's the walk into the church, isn't it?
That's brilliant. Well, that reinforces the idea that we should extend that. Gosh, so occasionally I get something right.
At last, it seems as if we're learning a little more about this extremely complex and frustrating site. If this is a cloister, there should be lots of human remains scattered around, but if there aren't, then we've stumbled upon something else entirely.
We're walking up to what I think is the kind of historic core of Blythburgh.
Away from the madness of the trenches, Stuart and the historians have gone walkabout, looking for the precinct or boundary of the Augustinian Priory.
Now standing here, effectively there's a crossroads. We've got a lane going down there under those trees. We've got the road disappearing down that direction and the church in the corner. We're effectively right at the core of the historic village. We're on the crossroads.
Stuart's now beginning to think that the original boundary around the Priory reflected the importance of our site, and it would have stretched well beyond Nick and Susan's garden. But although the story of Blythburgh is taking shape, the archaeology is once again causing all sorts of headaches. At the West End, Matt still hasn't found a wall big enough to hold up a church. While at the East End, Phil's finding more holes, and they don't look much like a Saxon shrine.
There's another Ballygreat void in there. I wonder whether we ain't got just big burrows. Whether that isn't what's creating our big hole down there.
This is more like Watership Down than Time Team, and Phil's probably got layers of demolition rubble to shift before he gets to any foundations. Whoever looted the stone from this old priory did a pretty thorough job.
The charters tell us that in around about 1300, there was an infirmary there. And with an infirmary, you would have an infirmary orchard.
But although we're struggling with the archaeology, we're still building up a fascinating picture of our priory.
We also have an inventory taken when the priory was dissolved, and it mentions a number of buildings. First of all, we have the religious ones. We've got the vestry mentioned, we've got the choir, we've got a chapel, but then we get mention of the kitchen, we get mention of the pantry, we get mention of the hall, we get mention of the parlour. These are the domestic activities of the priory. And then we get mention of a brew house.
Now, a brew house would be really, really fab, because I would like to brew.
Why are you so interested in brewing?
It's a bit of a family tradition. My father makes wonderful things out of the fruits and stuff which grow in his garden, and I would like to follow that.
So you could recreate the infirmary orchard, and then you could recreate the brew house as well. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
That's all part of Susan's grand plan. Sadly, our grand plan is falling apart. We've got so many trenches open, and none of them are making a great deal of sense, apart from our long trench on the north side.
Is the northern wall of the church? Yeah, so that lines up pretty well.
We've confirmed the north wall of the Norman church, and the trench is producing a jumble of roof tile, medieval window glass, and the church floor. But if there was an Anglo-Saxon monastery here, you'd have thought we'd have also found some Anglo-Saxon stuff with a hole this deep. Unfortunately, there's not a hint, not a smidge so far. At least there's progress at the East End, where Phil's uncovered big foundations as well as human remains.
Yeah, that's a bit of pelvis there, and there's a bit of rib there. And then in here, look, no, a whacking great leg bone, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not articulated, it's just a jumble of bones. But as far as we can see, going on what you've got there, we're straight outside the east wall of the abbey.
Yeah.
And you see what they've done, they've gone through here and they've bumped into human bones straight away.
Yeah. This is more like it, although there's plenty to be done before we can tell conclusively that this was the east end of the church. But we've lost the light, so it's time to catch up with what on earth's been happening. Or in some cases, to drown our sorrows.
Oh,
glued together. It's a solid man.
Oh, well, get one in for me.
It's been a really strange day today. On the one hand, we've got this fantastic church, we've got medieval glass, we've got those pointed windows, we think we know where the cloisters are. But on the other hand, the archaeologists seem really uneasy. We found 2 bodies, but they say there should be a lot more. We've got Anglo-Saxon pottery, great news. No, they say there should be shed loads more. What's going on? What's the matter with them? We'll find out tomorrow.
It's the beginning of day 3 here in Blythburgh in Suffolk, where we're in a back garden that's totally dominated by the remains of a magnificent 12th century Norman priory church. But that's about all we can say, in spite of spending 2 days peppering this site with something like 10 trenches. Considering we thought this would be an easy investigation, we're completely bewildered.
Morning, Matt.
Hi, Mick.
For example, Matt's been in this trench since day 1 and he still hasn't found the Great West Wall of the church, although he has uncovered a layer cake of mysterious floor levels and possibly evidence of an earlier building.
I mean, if you look here, can you see in the ground? Around here, it looks like there's a burnt-out post hole there, and that's below this early floor layer.
Oh, well, that's very useful, isn't it? Because that's pre the church, so we're presumably talking about something that's either Anglo-Saxon or even earlier than that.
Yeah.
You need some finds, don't you, really?
This glimpse of a potential Anglo-Saxon building could be the breakthrough we've been praying for. We suspect that the shrine of Anna, the heroic Anglo-Saxon king of East Anglia, could be under our priory church. But we've been so busy sorting out the Norman ruins that we've not had a chance to probe any further. But for once we're in luck, as some evidence is now beginning to emerge.
These bones here are sat in this light, sandy-coloured material right at the base of here, on which this wall appears to stand, which means these bones are potentially earlier than the construction of the priory itself.
Because they're under the rubble platform which was used to construct the priory.
Exactly.
What strikes me as interesting about this is that last night the archaeologists were getting really grim-faced and saying, oh, we don't think this could have been the site of the original Minster church associated with King Anna because we haven't got enough bodies, we haven't got enough skulls. If you're finding Anglo-Saxon skulls here, the Minster's back in the frame, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Well, that's a turn up for the books, as it would certainly seem that this site was viewed as holy ground before the Norman Priory was built. But the Priory continues to baffle us. Yesterday we were confident we'd found the eastern range of the cloister. This morning it's a bit more confusing, as we can still only find one wall of it when we'd expect to find at least two.
We're going to put another trench in.
Not another one. But Mick's not daunted, and he's now searching for the cloister's southern range. When you talk about ranges, I know this is a different priory, but you get the church there like that, don't you? And there's the cloister, and you have these are the ranges, aren't they, all around it like that?
That's right.
So where's that in our ruin?
Let me draw you a drawing, look.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure we've got the east range, which Faye put a trench across. We're fairly happy about that. And what we're actually looking for is the south range in that position there.
What would have happened inside that range?
Well, this is an important building and really quite a big building because it's where the refectory, the dining hall is. So it's a big building, rather like the church, on the other side of the cloister.
I'll bow to Mick's much greater experience and instinct on this, but he's got his work cut out if he's to prove his theory by the end of the day.
Started off with a big church with an aisle.
And it's not the only problem that needs solving in the next few hours. We're still trying to work out the size of the Priory Church. For a start, there's the width of the building, and whether this massive column is the corner of the crossing or an internal pillar supporting an aisle outside the nave. But this little lump of stone at the foot of the imposing stack of rubble might hold the answer. It looks like dressed stone, and if it matches the posh pillar on the other side, we should be able to get an answer. Meanwhile, we're still trying to lock down the east end of the church. And while Phil ponders what he has in his trench, John's found some surprising results even further out.
Look, if the radar results are right, then this is the east end of the church. And what I've sprayed on the ground is the middle of the wall, which comes down here and then turns and goes back.
This church is potentially massive, a much longer east end than we expected.
So you mean that this side of the crossing, that effectively the chancel, if it was a parish church, is the same length, same size, width and length, as the nave, the other side of the crossing?
Yeah.
I think that's all right, because it's a monastic church and this end is the most important. As long as it's no bigger...
But is it the Priory Church or the Anglo-Saxon Church? I'm not sure if Helen and John have got the same target in mind. Since we arrived, Helen's always been convinced that King Anna's here somewhere.
So what are we likely to get here?
Well, we're going to have the east wall, the altar, and between the altar and the east wall is the classic place for shrines. So if we have King Anna here in the 12th century... because he could have been, bear with me, if we have King Anna here in the 12th century, he's likely to be here through the whole of the medieval period. So this is the place that he's most likely to be.
Look, I'm going to be happy if we get the east wall of the church.
Back inside the church, Kerry's cleaned up the foot of the pillar, and it confirms this was an internal column, proving Bob's theory that the Priory Church had an aisle outside the nave.
A couple of days ago, you said that they couldn't be columns because they'd be the size of Tewkesbury Abbey or something. Monstrously enormous.
It's big. It's a special building. It really is. It must be the best bit of 13th century in the region.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Well, that's good news. Unfortunately, it doesn't help us with the East End, where Phil's resorted to extending his trench outwards to find it, while John starts moving in. But not everyone's convinced that John's new trench is in the right place.
All I'm saying is that if we're on the central axis, I wouldn't expect the central chapel to be any wider than that.
This is our last chance to pin down the East End, and there's less than 4 hours to go. At least Stuart's detective work has paid off. We can now see how much land King Henry I gave the Augustinians to found the priory.
I've tried to get outside it to try and understand the precinct within which...
And there was rather more to it than the ruins in Nick and Susan's back garden.
We've in fact only got a relatively small part of the site which is protected at the moment, pretty much just the core. And we're trying to really work out what the special archaeological interest of the site is.
Well, if I overlay my sort of little coloured drawing of the top of the modern layout of the village.
From the old roads and boundaries, we can see how the priory site dominated the village and didn't include the parish church, which came later.
There's the church in the village, and that's where the priory is. They're two separate sites. The pattern of roads all focusing on the church over here, but the road's actually going round the edge of this big space with the river forming one side. I mean, to me, that's almost sort of classic precinct definition anyway. So what we've got, in effect, is a precinct, which is all that area in there.
That's fantastic.
The Augustinians clearly had a large and powerful establishment here in Blythburgh, and Stewart suspects it could be situated on an earlier royal minster. And we've now found signs of earlier, possibly Saxon occupation in both Jackie's and Matt's trenches. In fact, Matt's got proof of several earlier buildings on this site.
Got over that side.
Well, just behind me there, I've got a glazed tile, which is identical to the one we've got next to that wall. So I know I've got that floor level.
Yeah.
But behind me, in the Victorian cut, we've got the same level, and below that, I've got an earlier floor, really substantial, and below that, an early post hole as well. So I've got stuff going down pretty deep.
So the post hole is sealed by 2 floor levels?
Yep.
All right.
This structure could potentially be the earliest settlement on the site, and with a stretch of the imagination, even the place where King Anna might have been brought after his death on the marshes. Sadly, John's hopes of finding the east end of the church seem to be fading.
So what are these? Just natural?
Lumps of chalk, aren't they? Yeah, I think it's potentially the underlying mother rock.
Solid geology.
Yeah, yeah.
Much of the team thinks this is natural material, but John's not giving up.
I ain't gonna fall in. Yeah, you've got a spade there. Yeah.
And it would seem that his determination may have paid off.
Pull it up, I'll be eating my words in a minute.
That has to be dressed stone, doesn't it?
I don't know.
It depends on the space you want.
In glacial terms, you get striations too. Flat plains occur.
How many archaeologists does it take to look at a piece of stone?
They look very much like axe marks to me. There, and they're crossing.
Yep.
So you've got them running at diagonals. I think John's won this one.
Oh.
Well, a result, I'd say. But a bit more of this foundation stone would strengthen John's case for an east end here. But over in Faye's Trench, on the potential southern cloister, there's a corner of a building and plenty of pottery.
And this also.
Ooh. Well, it all looks fairly sort of typical high medieval. It looks like Grimston were. They're making it up in Norfolk near King's Lynn. That's exactly the sort of thing you'd expect to see used on the tables. Nice green glaze, nice sort of decoration on it. I mean, yeah, that fits perfectly.
Could this be evidence of the refectory or dining room Mick suspected was here?
You know, usage, more refractory.
Well, probably not. One pot doesn't make a refectory. Yes, there was a building here, but not the one we're looking for. If it had been part of the cloistral range, there would have been hundreds, even thousands of bodies laid to rest around here. So, after 3 days of searching, Mick has conceded that the cloister must have been on the north side.
It's most likely to be either Roman or Saxon.
And after a huge amount of work, John's mission to find the east end of the church has come to nothing. We couldn't recover enough material to be sure it was from the Priory church, or for that matter, the earlier Saxon church.
It's an unusual stone type. It's not the same stone that we've got in the Priory.
But without digging here, we wouldn't have found this large, well-preserved male skeleton. It was buried with this amazing brooch, which dates the body to the late 13th century, when the Priory was probably at its zenith. At the height of its power, the Priory must have been an awe-inspiring place, a wealthy royal foundation and a focal point for pilgrims for hundreds of years. But by the time the monasteries were dissolved in the 16th century, it had already fallen into disrepair.
It's a rather sad story. In the kitchen, broken pots. You come into the pantry, a plain old tablecloth. There's no evidence of great wealth there.
Oh, that is really, really sad.
You come down, they had one horse and an old broken cart.
Oh my God,
it's
that is
a
so...
very
that's
sad
really
picture you get of the Priory in its last days.
Janine?
Yeah?
Is there any sign of the western wall yet?
Doesn't look like it. This water floor just keeps carrying on and on this way.
There's a similar downbeat ending for Matt's search for the great west end of the church. Although he must have been very close, we now suspect the wall has very probably been chopped away by later landscaping.
We have to follow that, and then I guess when the floor runs out, when the floor finishes, it must be where the wall is.
But Phil has saved the day, and Time Team can live to dig another trench. This is where the huge east window was, and who knows, the shrine of Anna, the first Christian king of East Anglia.
Well, I haven't got the east wall, Mick, but I know where it was. I mean, you can see here, look how the level of the sand drops really, really rapidly down here like this. And all this is actually filled up with demolition rubble. The amazing thing is, it's actually on this fence line. It's actually respecting the property boundary.
On an old property boundary.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I'll tell you something else about it too. This is a posh end of the church. Look at these beautiful pieces of work. This is posh flint work for the real expensive part of the church. And that is what you'd expect at the East End.
Yeah, that's very good, like the present parish church.
And there was more good news, really good news. Radiocarbon analysis suggests the burials in Phil's trench date to 930 AD. That means this man was buried 200 years before Henry I's priory was built on top of him. And in Jackie's trench at the foot of the church, the bones date much further back to the mid-7th century. That's around the time that King Anna was killed. So we can safely say that we've looked the Saxons in the face. It looks as if their church was here on this site, even though it could have been destroyed in later Viking raids. As for the whereabouts of King Anna's tomb, that still remains a mystery. So even after this hugely frustrating dig with all its puzzles and dead ends, we can show Nick and Susan that an impressive Augustinian church ran across more than the full width of their garden, with a great tower held up by pillars towards the east end and a cloister to the north. Nick, you've been glued to this for ages now, haven't you?
Yes, it's fascinating.
I bet when we came here, you never thought you'd see all this.
No, it's been mind-blowing. Mind-blowing because, firstly, I didn't realise just how big the church was.
Yeah.
I just had no concept whatsoever.
You didn't even really know you got a church here,
Well,
did
I
you?
didn't. I had no idea whatsoever.
It doesn't bother you that we found all these skeletons?
No.
I've got a sneaking suspicion Susan absolutely adores it.
She does now.